Hi. This time we will explain the storyline of the movie The Collector, which was released in 2009. The film follows Arkin, a repairman who gets trapped in a house with deadly traps after trying to steal from Uncle, a wealthy businessman. He must survive and save Uncle's family from the Collector, a serial killer who collects humans. Here is the plot. The story begins with a married couple returning home from a wedding. Upon arriving, they are startled to find a mysterious box inside the house with a note reading, "For the collection." When the husband begins to open it, an unexpected event occurs. The story then shifts to a repairman named Arkin, who happens to be fixing a large house owned by a man we call Uncle. Uncle is a gemstone businessman known for his kindness and respect for every profession, including Arkin, who is just an ordinary repairman. While Arkin was busy fixing a stuck door, he accidentally saw a family photo of Uncle, who had married a woman and had 2 daughters. Arkin then met Uncle's youngest daughter, whom we'll call Little Girl or Little Sister, who invited him to play and drink tea in her room. When Uncle arrives, Arkin feels a bit awkward and immediately apologizes for interacting directly with his youngest daughter, explaining that he only wanted to make Little Girl happy as she is almost the same age as his young daughter back home. After the incident, Arkin returned to work and accidentally discovered a wasp nest that could endanger the house's occupants. Coincidentally, there was an exterminator nearby, and Arkin asked one of the exterminators to immediately remove the wasp nest for the safety of everyone in the house. After finishing his work, Arkin sat in his car smoking, enjoying a moment of solitude. Suddenly, the eldest daughter of the man, whom we'll call older sister, appeared. From her appearance alone, we can immediately guess that older sister is the typical rebellious girl who often defies her parents. This was proven when older sister entered her room through the window and got into an argument with her mother about the family vacation plans for the coming days. Older sister feels lazy to join, as she prefers to spend time with her boyfriend, whom she considers more important than her family. Meanwhile, Arkin was getting ready to go home when he was approached by Uncle, who gave him his weekly pay for his work. Additionally, Uncle also gave him a small bonus, saying it was for Arkin's little daughter. At first, Arkin felt uncomfortable and refused the bonus, but since Uncle insisted, Arkin eventually accepted it reluctantly. He felt that even though he refused, such a situation couldn't be rejected outright, especially since Uncle had always been very kind to him. To make a long story short, night fell, and Arkin was seen heading to a bowling alley, which was his wife's workplace. There, he saw his little daughter sitting and waiting for her mother to finish work. Despite Arkin and his wife's salary barely being enough to get by, Arkin still bought her a doll as a gift to make her happy. Arkin felt happy seeing his little daughter happy, despite their difficult circumstances. However, that happiness did not last long. Arkin's wife arrived with a frown on her face, looking stressed. It turned out she was deeply in debt and frequently visited by debt collectors. Due to her meager salary, she demanded all of Arkin's day's wages to pay off her debts. Arkin felt pressured and desperately sought a way out of this difficult situation. The financial pressure grew heavier, despite his efforts to provide the best for his family. Arkin continued to search for a solution to the increasingly complex problem. Arkin's wife looked distressed after counting the money, realizing it wasn't enough to pay off the debt. The loan shark kept demanding payment that day, and if Arkin couldn't fulfill it, Arkin's wife threatened to leave with their child. Trapped in this situation, Arkin feels compelled to fulfill the demand. He resolves to find a quick way to obtain money. Arkin approaches a notorious gang leader in his city, despite being a former small-time thief who has reformed. However, driven by the need to provide for his family, especially to keep his wife and daughter together, Arkin feels he has no other choice but to return to the life he left behind. Arkin approached the boss to borrow special equipment typically used in theft or robbery. He explained that the house he planned to rob belonged to a gemstone businessman, none other than the man he had met earlier that day. In addition to providing the necessary equipment, the boss also acts as a fence for stolen goods. Feeling he plays an important role in the criminal world, the boss demands a significant cut, 60% of the loot, while the remaining 40% will be given to Arkin, who will act alone. Arkin initially refused the offer, but due to lack of time to negotiate, he eventually agreed to the deal. With his mind made up, Arkin decided to carry out his plan that very night, hoping to resolve all the issues plaguing him and his family. Upon arriving near the house of the man, Arkin, dressed like a robber, began approaching the house cautiously. However, just as he was about to enter the yard, he was bitten by a dog that suddenly appeared, belonging to an unknown owner. Despite being bitten, Arkin ignored it and continued with his plan to break into the house. Skillfully, he managed to open the door and entered the house. Slowly but surely, Arkin climbed the stairs and headed toward the bedroom of the man, where the safe he intended to steal was hidden behind a mirror. Using special tools provided by the boss, Arkin began working to open the safe's lock, doing so carefully, hoping no one would disturb him. However, shortly after that, Arkin was startled by the sound of footsteps entering the house. He suspected it might be Uncle and his family returning home and canceling their vacation plans. In tension, Arkin immediately searched for a place to hide just as the person entered the room where he was hiding. It turned out that it wasn't Uncle or his family, but a masked stranger. Arkin didn't know if he was another robber or had entered the wrong house, but one thing was certain: Arkin had to avoid being caught. He tried to escape through the back door, but it was locked tight. In panic, Arkin remembered his wife and his daughter and decided to abandon his plan to leave. He decided to continue his mission by going upstairs, hoping to finish the theft quickly. With even stronger determination, Arkin refocused on his goal, realizing that this was his last chance to get the money he desperately needed. As the tension escalated, Arkin knew he had to act quickly and cautiously. The dwindling time and constant threat looming over him left him increasingly desperate, but he remained determined to complete his mission and save his family from the difficulties they were facing. His actions pause briefly when Arkin hears an odd sound coming from the ventilation shaft. It turns out to be the voice of Uncle, who is severely injured. Arkin doesn't know exactly what happened, but Uncle accuses him of being involved in the incident. At that moment, Uncle tries to grab a golf club as if intending to fight back, but Arkin feels increasingly trapped and confused by the situation. Arkin realized he was trapped in a house full of deadly traps. He tried to call 911, but instead was pierced by a sharp needle, injuring his ear, and his right hand was trapped in a trap on the window. He nearly fell into another more deadly trap with wires attached to sharp nails. In a state of high tension, Arkin knows that every step he takes could be fatal. While the masked man is busy in the room, Arkin takes the opportunity to return to the living room, where he finds a chandelier with a sharp knife ready to fall. Arkin felt trapped and realized that every corner of the house was filled with deadly traps. Every step was risky, and hidden traps were everywhere. Trying to find a way out, Arkin, man, goes down to the basement and instead finds Uncle tied up and severely injured. Arkin explains that he is not involved in this incident and assures Uncle to trust him. Fortunately, Uncle trusts Arkin and reveals the safe code so Arkin can retrieve the pistol hidden inside. Before continuing, Arkin decides to meet Auntie, who is also tied up in the bathtub. In a very distressed state, Auntie begs Arkin to ensure the safety of her youngest child, little girl or little sister. However, to climb up and save the little girl, Arkin needs a distraction. Therefore, the auntie is forced to scream as loud as she can to make the masked man come down. While the masked man is busy torturing Uncle and Auntie, Arkin quickly opens the safe using the code given by Uncle. Not only does he find a pistol, but Arkin also discovers a gemstone, which was his true reason for coming to the house. At this point, Arkin could have simply left and focused on finding a way out, without caring about Uncle's family. However, because he had promised to save them and there was little sister trapped there, Arkin couldn't just leave. He felt he still had a conscience and was determined to help them escape the danger. Another problem arises when Arkin cannot find the bullets for the gun he took. Suddenly, he hears a sound coming from inside the closet, which most likely is coming from the little sister. When Arkin tries to open the closet, he is shocked to find that behind the door is the husband, who had been used as bait to trap the family of the uncle. At this point, everything begins to unfold. The masked man who had been threatening them all along is not just an ordinary robber. He was known as the Collector, who collected humans according to his criteria and eliminated those he did not want. When Arkin heard the uncle screaming in pain, he knew he had to act quickly. To avoid being discovered, Arkin put the husband back into the box and rushed to find the little girl. Arkin's journey to save himself and his family is increasingly hampered by various traps set up in the house, one of which is a trap in the form of a highly dangerous chemical liquid that can burn anyone who comes into contact with it. Accidentally, Arkin steps on the liquid, which immediately burns his shoes. In a panic, Arkin quickly covers them with a book to avoid more severe injuries. Unfortunately, despite his efforts to avoid it, Arkin remains trapped in another trap set up at the window. When the Collector entered the room, he found no one except a dead cat at the window and several books scattered on the floor covered in chemical liquid. Arkin, hiding behind a pile of pillows and blankets belonging to the little girl, hoped not to be detected, though the tension grew and he was nearly discovered. After the collector leaves, Arkin quickly returns to the basement to save Uncle and Auntie. But when he arrives, Arkin finds Uncle already dead, hanging upside down with his internal organs exposed, showing how brutal the murder was. In sorrow and anxiety, Arkin tries to save Auntie, who is still alive though, in a very weak condition. Carefully, Arkin moves to free Auntie, but the situation worsens when Auntie sees her husband in such a horrific state. Unable to contain her emotions, Auntie screams hysterically and runs upstairs. Tension escalates as Auntie faints after being struck by the collector. While Arkin hides under the table, desperately trying not to be discovered, he felt extremely anxious as the sound of the collector's footsteps grew closer. But with a stroke of luck, the collector did not search for Arkin but instead picked up a spider nearby and released it outside the house. While the collector is busy with the body of Auntie, Arkin quickly climbs upstairs to find a way out of the house. However, at that exact moment, the older sister returns home after going on a date with her boyfriend. Assuming her family has gone on vacation, the older sister invites her boyfriend inside to continue their activities. When trying to open the front door, the older sister failed to do so because the collector had set a trap using a hanging lamp with a knife that could only be opened from inside the house. Realizing their arrival, the collector quickly unlocked the back door and let them in. Once the older sister and her boyfriend entered the house, they were unaware of the danger lurking nearby. While the two were alone, the collector suddenly appeared and startled them. Without saying much, the collector immediately pushed the older sister's boyfriend into a room filled with bear traps. Arkin, who witnessed the event from his hiding place, could only watch the horror unfold helplessly. After that, the collector dragged the older sister and tied her to the stairs using sharp wire. The tension escalated, and Arkin knew that time was running out to save the older sister. As the collector was about to execute the older sister, an alarm suddenly sounded, disrupting his focus. He climbed up to turn it off, giving Arkin the chance to act. With unwavering determination, Arkin emerges to save the older sister, but the terrified older sister mistakes him for the collector in disguise. In her panic, the older sister grabs the scissors with the deadly trap, nearly endangering Arkin. The tension rises, and Arkin must act quickly to save her, realizing that there is nothing left to save and that the gemstone he was after is now in his hands. Arkin decides to leave the house for good. He chooses to go upstairs and try to escape through the window, hoping to get out safely. However, his escape is once again blocked when he sees the little girl calling him from the window of one of the rooms. Hearing her voice, Arkin feels unable to abandon her and returns inside the house to save the child. Just as he enters, the collector spots the little girl and attempts to capture her. At that critical moment, Arkin managed to defeat the collector by knocking him down. But due to the resistance, the collector finally realized Arkin's presence in the house. Having been discovered, Arkin had no choice but to fight back more fiercely. In an increasingly desperate situation, Arkin used every means at his disposal to fight, including shocking him with water from the aquarium and the TV, which was still connected to the electrical current. The tension escalated, and Arkin knew that he had to end this fight immediately if he wanted to survive with the little girl. The collector did not seem easy to defeat. In fact, he tried to push the husband to be a sacrifice in his cruel plan. In an increasingly desperate situation, Arkin quickly picks up the little girl and runs toward the bathroom, trying to avoid the traps around them. As Arkin nearly gets caught by a trap hook piercing his face, his top priority remains the safety of the little girl. Arkin forces himself to push the little girl into the dirty laundry chute leading directly to the basement, hoping to save the child. However, when he himself becomes trapped and the collector manages to enter the basement, Arkin can only surrender as the collector easily knocks him down. In an increasingly dire situation, Arkin is now bound and helpless before the collector, who intends to kill him in a slow and painful manner. However, Arkin refuses to give up. He realizes that the little girl is hiding under the table, so Arkin tries to distract the collector by shouting and insulting him, calling him a cowardly psychopath who dares not show his true face. Of course, those words enraged the collector, and in response, he used several Galapagos cockroaches to hurt Arkin's stomach. The tension escalated, but Arkin continued to fight back. Suddenly, a police car appears as a result of an accidental emergency call made by the older sister when her cell phone fell. The collector, who does not want the police to interfere in his business, immediately approaches the officer and uses his vicious dog to kill the police officer. Amid the chaos, Arkin realizes that the opportunity to fight back and escape is growing, and with determination and courage, he prepares to act, hoping to defeat the collector and save himself and the little girl. Arkin once again makes the most of every moment, managing to free himself from several hooks embedded in his skin. However, as soon as the collector realizes he has escaped, Arkin quickly decides to climb into the dirty laundry chute. In desperation, Arkin plans to pull the little girl using a nearby curtain. Knowing that every step he takes must be calculated, as danger continues to lurk, the situation grows increasingly tense. But Arkin refuses to give up and continues to fight with all his strength. Aware that the struggle was far from over, Arkin began planning his next move. Facing the fierce dog belonging to the collector, Arkin used whatever was around him to survive. He cleverly used a bucket filled with burning paper, turning it into a weapon to confront the dog. With extraordinary courage, Arkin manages to defeat the aggressive dog, though the battle grows more intense. However, he knows the greatest threat is yet to come, the collector, now armed with a firearm. When facing the collector directly, who was ready to end everything, Arkin remained steadfast with a strong resolve within him. He knew this was his last chance to survive. With his courage burning brighter than ever, Arkin leads the fight with unwavering confidence. In the intense battle, Arkin manages to take down the collector with relative ease, despite the previously tense situation. This victory brings a glimmer of hope, but Arkin knows that the journey to safety is still fraught with challenges. Quickly, Arkin picks up the fallen key and begins opening each lock one by one, but the collector has already risen again, and the situation becomes increasingly critical. With no other choice, Arkin knew he had to eliminate the collector once and for all. He used the trap that the collector had set himself, defeating him in an ironic twist. The weapon turned against its master. With unwavering determination, Arkin managed to overcome the threat, but he also knew that his journey to save himself and the little girl was far from over. Carrying the little girl, Arkin ran toward the middle of the road, hoping to escape the house as quickly as possible. Just as the police arrived, though too late, Arkin managed to save the little girl. He also managed to obtain the gemstone that was his goal, which he planned to sell to ensure the safety of his wife and his daughter. Arkin felt a little relieved when he finally found himself outside the house, boarding the ambulance that had been waiting. However, that freedom did not last long. Suddenly, in a highly shocking turn of events, the collector, who seemed impossible to kill, reappeared. This time, he managed to capture Arkin and block his path. The shock and surprise intensified as Arkin realized that the collector was the pest control officer who had previously given him a thumbs up in the film's opening scene. The unexpected presence of the collector shows how evil the plan is, and Arkin is once again trapped in a deadly game full of threats.